Hello, my name is Randall Borden. I'm an attorney and I'm barred in both Virginia and Maryland to do family law. Welcome to my podcast and thank you for joining me today. Today I have with me Courtney Schulnick. She is a mindfulness educator of the corporate wellness consultant. She's a keynote speaker who helps the high stress professionals build real world resilience. She brings a unique perspective because she was in the trenches herself 2 decades as a litigator. So she understands the pressure from being always on and always subject to unending stress, dealing with the high stakes, managing constant demands from clients in courts and opposing counsel. Now she teaches practical, accessible mindfulness tools grounded in a MBSR based training and years of working with bar associations, corporations, law schools, leadership teams. So she is still in the legal world. Her work focuses on stress reduction, clarity under pressure, and sustainable performance. She also has a podcast herself called Conscious Corner with Courtney. She's created Adventures of Little C, which is a mindfulness-inspired greeting card line designed to bring compassion and encouragement into everyday life. So, Courtney, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Okay. Wow. So two decades as a litigator. So what does it look to you, high pressure, day to day? And then what is it, at what moment did you realize that that's no longer for you and you have a better solution?
Yeah. So before I learned mindfulness, many of my days began very, very early in the morning. They still begin very early in the morning, but in a different way.
Mhm.
Pre-mindfulness, I would often wake up to the sound of my alarm and instantaneously go to my to-do list. And from that moment on, basically never turned off. I was in constant go mode, as you mentioned earlier. And my days were very long. They were full of high stakes cases. I would often get up early in the morning and right away just look at my what felt like endless to-do list and start worrying, how am I going to get all of this done? Mind you, at that time, I had a toddler and a newborn.
Oh, wow.
So on top of the demands in the legal profession, I also had demands in my personal life. So I would often set my alarm so that I can get up before anyone else was up and get some billable hours under my belt before going into the office early in the morning. And once I would get into the office, I would start working on high stakes cases. I would conduct research. I would have to deal with some difficult adversaries, sometimes challenging clients, whether it was the insured. So I was doing defense litigation, dealing with insurance companies. You could deal with a challenging adjuster sometimes, or maybe really worried insured. So it was challenging. It was challenging. And when I realized that there was another way of doing this type of work and another way of being in life, it was really when we experienced a sudden loss in the family. We had a 10-year-old dog who, in many ways, he was our first child before we had human sons. And he got, one morning I was in a case management conference in Philadelphia, and I got a call from my husband that our dog, Jackson, was sick. He was very sick. And I hurried home. He passed away just hours later. And even though that in and of itself was devastating, what I think really came to a head was just how much I had been stuffing down and suppressing from the stressors at work, from the busyness of life. And it all came to a head in that moment.
Right.
And after days and weeks and even months of really being very emotional, my oldest son, who at the time was maybe 4 years old, he said, "Mom, you have to let go." And here was this little tiny human being who had so much wisdom that really hit home for me. And that was the moment where I realized that if nothing else, that I wanted to show up in a different way for him, for my other son, for my husband, for my clients,
Right.
and for myself. So
Mhm.
that was the pivotal moment where I kind of stopped in my tracks and said, okay, what can I do to take better care of myself? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, so I guess you didn't just jump into to teaching mindfulness. How did you work your way into it from that moment?
Yeah. So I had been treating with a therapist to find ways to better manage stress and anxiety. I found that the work that I did as a litigator was inherently stressful. And while I got great outcomes for my clients year after year, I really deep down was struggling with how to balance everything. So when I noticed that my stress levels were growing exponentially, she recommended that I look into mindfulness. I
Hmm.
wasn't quite sure what it was. I did a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
research
Uh-huh.
at the bookstore or the library, and it caught my attention. There was enough curiosity that I wanted to learn more.
Mhm.
So at the time, I was living in the city of Philadelphia, and the Center for Mindfulness at Jefferson was on my way home from the
Oh,
office.
uh,
I looked into, they have what's known as the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, also known as the MBSR program. It's an 8-week program that takes place once a week for 8 consecutive weeks. You meet for 2.5 hours. It's offered virtually and also in person. And towards the end of the program, typically between week 6 and 7, there's a full day silent meditation retreat. It's a culmination of all of the practices that you learned over the course of the program, and you sort of weave in and out of the different meditation practices in silence. So it's
hmm.
a way to deepen your practice and your connection with yourself and others in community. So that was really that, the description of the program and the orientation session was enough to convince me to give it a go. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so how does it differ from, say, meditation or something like that?
So there is a meditation component for sure woven into the program, but mindfulness generally is just our innate natural ability to be aware in the
Mhm.
present moment. Oftentimes we are distracted, we're checked out, or we're disconnected from the present moment. And although it's our natural ability to be in the here and now, meditation, formal meditation practice is what helps us to strengthen our ability to be present for ourselves as well as others.
And is this something that you need to buy a yoga mat or go to a special place, or is this something you could carry with you? I mean, how do you turn it on? How do you turn it off?
Yeah. So you don't have to necessarily buy a yoga mat. While
Uh,
there is a bit of mindful movement and some mindful floor yoga
mm,
that is interwoven into the program, you can practice without a yoga mat. But
mhm.
it's helpful. It's really helpful to learn mindfulness from a mindfulness instructor. And it can be really beneficial to not only work together with an instructor, but when organizations, law firms, teams, companies bring mindfulness into the workplace, it's pretty spectacular what can take place, what can be cultivated when mindfulness is learned in community with others.
Mhm.
So it is something that is natural, that is innate, that is always here for us, but it does take practice to strengthen our ability to connect with our inner resources and to show up for ourselves.
Well, I mean, how would it differ, say, from just you've done 100 trials and the next one is just one more, and you don't really get that nervous about it, and you just kind of go through your checklist and go through the motions, and you get kind of the result that you want, and then you just repeat it the next day. I mean, I guess the stress is always there, but you kind of know the ropes, know the path, know what's going to happen. It's That's more of a habit, though, isn't it? It would just be rather than actually thinking about it and trying to figure it out. Is that the right analysis?
Well, you mentioned nervousness and stress, and I think
Hmm.
it goes without saying that we live in a pretty chaotic world, that
Right.
we're not necessarily able to remove feelings of stress
Hmm.
or overwhelm or nervousness. But what we can do with mindfulness practice is gain a better understanding of how we're relating to the stressors in our lives.
Hmm.
So we may still get nervous before a trial, and we still may feel stress. And it's not that stress is necessarily a bad thing. Some level of stress can actually help us perform better.
Hmm.
But when we have chronic stress, when we're not aware of how stress is impacting our ability to perform, it erodes our performance. So mindfulness helps us to deepen our awareness, to understand how we're perceiving the moments of our lives. And with that awareness, we can find ways to support ourselves. I also like something that you just mentioned, that we kind of fall into habits.
Right.
So in my case, I was trying a lot of cases, whether it was a full jury trial
Hmm.
or arbitrations, or even prior to trying a case, I was taking depositions. And we do get, especially when we become more seasoned attorneys,
Hmm.
we do fall into this knowing it all kind of,
Right.
or at least we get comfortable
Hmm.
in something that we get to do over and over again. And that can be tricky, because while it can take some of the discomfort out of the experience, we can get a bit stale. We can lose some of our creativity. And when we think, just because we've been down this road before, we've done countless depositions, or we tried a similar situation, a divorce case, and
Hmm.
we kind of know how one case went, we may not truly listen to what our clients in any particular case want.
Right.
So with mindfulness, we can bring what we refer to as a beginner's mind. It's a quality of freshness, newness, seeing something as if we're seeing it for the very first time. And that can be a huge game changer in how we show up for our clients, our cases, and the outcomes that we can obtain for our clients.
I'm trying to think again. With me, I want, all of my notebooks, my three ring binders, this one and this one and this one and this one. I want my witness sheets. I want my income expense sheet. Uh,
Yeah.
Go through it, analyze it, know what questions I'm going to ask, have my questions written down, and that's kind of my security blanket, or that I build around myself. And then
Yeah.
when I go into court, I want a table that's big enough,
Hmm.
I mean, and then you do kind of know the outcome. But I guess the mindfulness would be the trust the client places in you. I mean, would that be reassuring your witnesses, knowing your judge? I mean, how would that play into something? Yeah, to me, the stress relief is I've got the case well prepared.
Yeah.
Starts a year earlier. And
Yeah.
here I am now, and hopefully I've gotten everything all buttoned up. And then I guess the mindfulness would be, is there a way to settle the case creatively, right? Or a way to ask for a decision that may not be apparent? Is that
Well, what you're speaking to in terms of having your notepads a
right?
certain way,
Mhm.
and maybe having that special pen that you like, or your
Right, right.
highlighter, or
Mhm.
the tabs, that's all wise discernment. That's skillful. That's preparation.
Mhm.
So mindfulness doesn't have to be distinguished from that. That's just that's actually very mindful. You're using that sense of inner wisdom, and from your other cases, you know what works for you. You know what helps
Mhm.
you to shine in the courtroom. And it's not about having to achieve a certain outcome, while being more mindful can help us to think more clearly and to focus our attention where it matters most. Oftentimes, we're just on autopilot, especially in the busyness of the
Mhm.
work that we do as attorneys,
Right.
and in family law, all the different ways that we're pulled at any given moment. And if we're not aware of what's coming up for ourselves, then we're more like machines, just checking off the boxes on our list. So mindfulness can help us to not only be aware of what's taking place in the courtroom, but also notice what's coming up for ourselves. How are we feeling in the body? We spend so much time in our minds strategizing and resolving and coming up with creative outcomes in our cases that we're often disconnected from our bodies. And we want to be in touch with what's showing up in our bodies. So we can be aware of that. We can notice what we're telling ourselves. We can notice our emotions. And when we can see more fully what is here, again, not just of our clients, not what's taking place in the courtroom or what the judge is doing, but also be aware of how we are moment to moment. That's what allows us to take better care of ourselves and show up in a more powerful, resilient way that's sustainable long term.
Yeah, that's a key, especially as you get a little bit older. Sustainable and something you want to do every day.
Yeah,
that's another big feature.
Yeah.
So, what about like with other people? I mean, the opposing counsel, they're sometimes very difficult. Sometimes they're worse than very difficult.
Yeah, you're being kind with that. Yeah.
Children's show. But then, I mean, how do you, kind of the way I think of it is, okay, you threw this at me. I'm going to take it. I'm going to make it into and then fashion it into a weapon that somehow I can turn around and use against you. And, what's the best way to do that? How do I do it? I might set it aside for a while and then come back to it. A strategy, just a nasty email, more false accusations, that kind of, that's kind of the way that I take it, let it sit for a bit and then respond. But that has a cost too, and keeping all that anger and frustration in. But I mean, again, that's about the best that I can do with, when I get that from the other side. Is that mindfulness also? I mean, taking the spear and throwing it right back at you?
Well, we're not becoming, with mindfulness, we're not becoming soft or a pushover. It doesn't mean that we are just going to let the other side push us around. In fact, it makes us more resilient. And it's the way that we can become more resilient in this work is to notice how the work, the challenging, emotionally challenging nature of this work can cause us to fall into reactivity. It goes without saying that aside from the attorneys on the other side, that even working with our own clients, they're going through so much emotional trauma, and we absorb, as their attorney in such an emotionally charged area of the law, we can absorb that intensity. And if we're not aware of it, and that's compounded by a difficult adversary, we will become reactive. We will fire off a nasty email, or we will say something in court that we might later regret or doesn't reflect us in the best light in front of our clients. So you said something earlier about space. And by giving ourselves moments to pause, we can create some space, maybe not physical space, because sometimes we're just in a room with a difficult attorney and we can't necessarily leave the room, but we can give ourselves moments to pause, to connect with ourselves. And just by turning inward as opposed to perpetually being in doing mode, we create some space so that if we're feeling reactive, if our nervous systems are off the charts and we're really wired, we can invite a bit of ease. We can take a few relaxing sighs, and that can really be a game changer, especially in this type of work where, again, our emotions can be so intense. So to be able to recognize that, to create some space, will allow us to respond in more conscious and skillful ways, as opposed to just adding fuel to the
Right.
fire and throwing back at our adversaries what maybe they're throwing at us. We can go about it in a really effective but wise way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, the old adage, let it sit for a day, write your response, but don't mail it yet. Put
Yeah.
the old days, put the envelope on the side of your desk and then get to it first,
Yeah.
morning, and then think about it. Yeah, so that's yeah,
I
I guess
had
that's part of it, right? Just let it sit for a bit and think about it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, if you have the luxury of having a day or a weekend, that's great, to step away from it. But even just 30 seconds, it doesn't have to be anything extensive. Sometimes just a moment or a few moments can be so helpful. It's like setting the reset, like
Hmm.
hitting the reset button. One of my former bosses once shared something really wise with me. It stuck with me. And he said, before you fire off that nasty email or before you send out a letter to an attorney or to a client, imagine that email or that letter was going to be blown up and used as an exhibit at trial.
Yeah.
And the whole courtroom, your clients, your adversaries, the judge, everybody's going to see what it is you said or wrote. So again, giving ourselves a moment or moments to rest,
Yeah.
to notice how we are, and to use mindfulness tools to calm the nervous system, to regulate ourselves. It can change the way the moments of our lives unfold in a pretty powerful way.
But a lot of times, what I do is say to the client, write it down and send it to me, and then
Yeah.
then that makes things a little bit more realistic. I mean, if something terrible happened, obviously I want to know about it immediately. But
Yeah.
if it wasn't that bad, but just this is the 14th time, they've done this, not returning clothing during visitation, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, then write it down, keep a journal, give me a calendar of all the times you've written it down. You're not going to remember it. You go up to court to testify. You're going to say they did it 14 times. Opposing counsel is going to say, name them. And then you're going to pull out your calendar
Right.
because that's why you got to keep your calendar, make your evidence.
Yeah. Yeah. You have paper trail.
Right. And then they don't get scrambled on the witness stand. They've got their calendar. They don't get confused. They don't get, when opposing counsel insults them, how could you possibly remember all 14 incidents? Well, I wrote it all down each time, and I have it right here. And again, obviously, enormous credibility with the judge. Opposing counsel can't rattle them because they've got their security blanket.
Yeah. So that's skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's skillful. That's taking the proper steps to build your case. That's different than, say, your client just showing up at their soon-to-be ex-spouse's house or sending out a contentious email or somehow pumping their child with a certain message that there's real repercussion to that.
Yep. Well, again, I say, and again, it's the same thing. Like, you go to court and you say they did this all the time. Well, really, what does that mean? Once a week, once a month, once a year? You got to write, think about how many ways they can trip you up when you make an open-ended statement like that. Think about how you're going to sound. You're going to sound just like whining, complaining, vindictive. But if you have proof, you rely on the proof, you have it in your hand, consistent behavior, writing stuff down as it happened is either evidence or it's sufficient to refresh your recollection. Present recollection recorded or something. There's one of those things. And the other side knows they can't screw with you.
Right.
The other parent knows. If they are late, if they do just blow off a visitation, it's going to be written down. And if that happens, text the custodial parent and tell them what's what. Sorry, get it next time. send over a pizza to the house, to make up for you can't be there, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then the other side knows that you're with it, you've got it all together, and this is how everyone expects you to behave, and there'll be consequences if you don't, and now you're controlling the other parent, and you're in command, and you're the better parent, and the kids rely on you, and this is how things are, and everybody starts following your rules. So that's kind of, I don't know, is that mindfulness or just strategy, or I mean, it kind of gets the client to behave themselves rather than
Yeah.
react and send, oh yeah, well, I'll bet you're with that person again, aren't you? That's why you don't have time for your kids. But write it down, get organized, and then show it. You'll be able to show it to the judge, and that's
Yeah.
when you'll get your revenge if that's what you want.
Yeah, I mean, all of these sound like examples of taking wise action. And what is coming through and what you're sharing is being able to see the bigger picture.
Right, right.
Sometimes when we're on autopilot, we get so laser focused
Right.
on pieces of our case or wanting to get retaliation against the other person that we can't take a step back. So your training and the ways you prepare and your ability to be more expansive, to see how this is going to play out. Again, you've been doing this. It's not like this is your first rodeo. So but sometimes when maybe we're newer and it can be harder to kind of put the brakes on, step back, pause, take in, how's this going to benefit me? How's this going to benefit my client? But mindfulness is that awareness piece. It sounds to me that you from your experience and from your ability to create some space, that you're able to take in the bigger picture as opposed to only being laser focused on a piece of the case. Yeah.
And then, you've got your calendar, you can show it to your kids in 5 years when the other parent says, you never let us go to see the other parent. You always kept us away. Well, no, because look, here's the calendar with the 14 times that, visitation was missed.
Yeah.
And so you got that too. If you want to show that to your kids or not, or they see you writing it down, and you can say, well, my parent writes it all down. I don't know why you're saying that. It's prove yourself, show up on time for visitation. If you can't make it, tell us ahead of time. And then your kids know that's the way things are, and they've got stability in their lives, and they're I don't know. I'll let you know in 100 years once I got it all figured out.
I will say that when I was working as a family law practitioner, and in addition to that, I clerked in family court, I didn't have mindfulness training. I was trained well as an attorney, and I had experience working in a courtroom. I was a communications major in college. So I had very important skills that could make a difference in the work that lawyers in the family sector do. But you need a really strong backbone. Not physically. I mean, physically, it's more metaphorically. In order to do this work and to be able to manage the emotional intensity and the adversarial nature of it as attorneys, in order to really be a rock for our clients and to do the high level thinking that this type of work demands of us, it's so important to take good care of ourselves, to find ways to calm our own nervous systems and to strengthen our ability to be in this work. Because I know that as much as I enjoyed family law, I eventually left that sector and went into civil defense work, premises liability work, because I didn't feel that I could keep up with the emotional intensity of it. But these practices, mindfulness practices, they help us to not only be in it. Like when I was practicing in family law, I would have to physically leave the space. I would have to leave the courtroom or leave the office if I wasn't, if I didn't have to be in the courtroom, leave the office, take a walk. And what's so powerful about mindfulness practice is that we learn ways to support ourselves to be in the chaos of it all, so that we can be in the midst of trial, or we can be across from a difficult attorney during a contentious deposition, and we can connect with these inner resources to ground ourselves. So everything that you're saying, there's a mindfulness piece that can be woven into it. But what is so almost like a superpower is we don't have to go anywhere to get it. It's always here with us, and we can strengthen it through practice and be in really challenging situations and experiences and become stronger for it.
Is that when you're in the situation, or when you're when you're going? I mean, what my response would be, I write down all the questions I'm going to ask.
Yeah.
And no matter how much I get rattled or thrown off or surprised, I've got my list. And this is what I want to get in.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. And of course, I give it to the client ahead of time. And, we go back and forth on what questions to ask. And is that mindfulness before? I mean, in case I do get into that situation where I don't know.
That to me, I would call it mindful preparation.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're very aware, but what you're also speaking to is uncertainty. And the truth is, we can't control what's going to happen. I mean, we can control maybe how with practice, we can control how we're showing up, how we're responding instead of reacting. But there's so much uncertainty in life as a whole, but especially in the work that we do. And an expert may not show up to trial. Our client, even though we've spent, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but I can't tell you, I spent countless hours prepping my clients for what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. And nerves, they get the best of us. And I've had clients who have said things where I think, oh my gosh, this whole case is going to fall apart. And so the truth is we just don't know what's to come in the future, but we can take mindful steps to prepare in this moment. When, as attorneys, I think we want, it comes from a good place. We want to get great outcomes for our clients. We want to be prepared. We don't want to be caught with our pants down, so to speak. And so we do all the things, and that's responsible. That's great preparation. But what do we do in those moments where we get thrown a curveball? What do we do in those moments where we were so sure the judge wasn't going to let something in and it comes in? So we need to be able to think fast on our feet, and we have to find ways to ground ourselves so that we don't get pushed over by the weight of this work. And that's really what we're sort of tuning, we're strengthening with mindfulness practice. So all of the things that you're sharing, again, I think it's skillful. You're using wise discernment. You're reflecting on past experiences, but there's only so much we're in control of. And so how do we support ourselves in those moments where things maybe don't go as we plan for them to go?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, I'll let you know in 100 years. It does sound a lot like Stoicism. I don't know if you ever
Yeah, yeah. My brother, I have a big book. My brother gave me. I dipped my toes in it, and yes, I think there is some overlap. But the what I love about mindfulness practice, and it's unlike some other meditation practices that I learned, is it's not as rigid, and we're not forcing ourselves to be a particular way, and we're not so tightly wound around having to get anywhere. It's about meeting ourselves where we are and, in a sense, loosening the reins a bit. We're so critical of ourselves as attorneys. We really judge ourselves so much in so many different ways, whether we feel like we did a good enough job in a particular case, if we wrote a bad motion, or if we got a great outcome. And we compare ourselves to a lot of our, even our colleagues, our peers. We tend to rehash the past. We beat ourselves up for past cases where we think we should have done more. We didn't do a good enough job. And just what you're talking about with preparation, that's very skillful. But sometimes we get so caught up in worrying about the future and wanting things to be a certain way that it actually works against us. So the more and more we practice formal mindfulness meditation, the more we can notice some of these habits. Again, some of these habits that you mentioned are great. Some of our habits are not really serving us. And that's what the formal practice helps us to become more aware of. So we can get rid of those. We can let go of those parts of our habits that don't really serve us, and we can create more nourishing and actually beneficial habits and patterns that support us in the work that we do.
And of course, you don't know if you have bad habits unless you stand back and look at yourself and, what is it somebody else, I guess, what is it somebody else sees, or filming yourself doing it and then watching the film, trial practice seminars. They always do that. They make you watch it.
Yeah. I work with attorneys who they are taking such a push through approach and kind of like grind it out. And they never turn off that sometimes it's a wake-up call, whether it's a health scare, whether they're noticing that they're not able to think clearly or focus, or they have brain fog, or their nervousness is going through the roof, that sometimes it can be a situation that sort of wakes us up, that taps us on the shoulder, but it doesn't have to be that way. With even just small practices, we can recognize some of our habits that really aren't serving us, and we can make changes. And scientific research shows, because I often have attorneys tell me, I don't have time for this. Do you see my calendar? My calendar is too busy for this. And scientific research shows that even just a few moments each day can have a profound impact in how we feel, how we think, even our biological makeup and our neural pathways, that with, these small glimpses, many times we can change ourselves in really significant ways.
And so how do you get started? I mean, you find a teacher, right? Or find a seminar, or find something like that. That would be the way to begin. Okay. Yeah. Keep going. We hit a limit. Okay.
Okay. In order to really benefit from mindfulness practice, you need to taste the fruits of the formal practice. So it can be really helpful to work one-on-one with a teacher, or you can work if companies or organizations are willing to bring workshops or continuing legal education sessions into the workplace, or multi-week programs. That's a really wonderful and supportive way to learn mindfulness. There are centers around the world at this point where, if you want to take a deeper dive, you can enroll in the MBSR program, where you're not just with attorneys, but with a host of other people. So there really are a lot of ways. If you want to visit my website, I have a lot of different resources. So anything from an audio recording of a formal mindfulness meditation to a video, you can read articles. But I would say that to really reap the benefits of mindfulness practice, you need to be willing to make even small moments in your life to do the practice, the formal practice. And then with consistency, with regularity of formal practice, increasingly mindfulness is incorporated into even our busiest days. So it's something that by strengthening our ability through formal practice, our ability to connect with the present moment, that over time, it naturally weaves its way into our daily routines. So it's less about doing and more being.
Right, but the one builds on the other. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
And then I guess you can kind of see other people's motives, see the reason certain things happen, that the traffic jam is not anything you can do about it by yelling.
Yeah.
It's the way that the highway department designed it or didn't design it or things like that.
That's a great, we actually use in the MBSR program, when we talk about stress reactivity, we use a traffic jam as an example, because it goes to show just how worked up we can get over something that we can't control. But with awareness, we can use mindfulness tools to invite a bit of ease. And the traffic jam is a great metaphor for life, because in the work that we do as lawyers, so many times there are going to be situations and experiences that aren't exactly how we want them to be.
Right.
And while we can't change them, we can't get rid of the stressors, we can notice how we're relating to those moments. And when we can see that clearly, that becomes a gateway to opening ourselves to more adaptive and supportive ways of being with challenges in our lives.
Kind of the way I think of like a traffic jam is as I mean, again, it could just be an accident. Obviously, you can't deal with that much. But if it's intentionally underbuilt road, you just kind of think back on what is it that's going to happen here. You know, in 5 years, these people are going to be working someplace else. They're going to be working from home. They're going to be not doing the job at all. And so when a municipal government allows this to occur over and over again with really no efforts to solve a problem, whether it's a dirty subway, unsafe subway, people aren't going to do that. You know, they're not going to they're going to do home delivery of groceries rather than driving, 5 miles in a half-hour traffic jam. They're going to, again, work from home. They're going to have Zoom. They're going to invent, virtual meetings. And then,
or they may find there's a different route. There's a different way. And that's what mindfulness can open us to, that we don't have to go down the same path over and over again, getting caught in that traffic jam, that we can find ways around it. Not always in a traffic, like a literal traffic jam. There may be just a one highway to get where we want to go. But oftentimes we box ourselves up thinking like this is a major roadblock. And it's not necessarily true. But if we're not willing to notice what it is we're telling ourselves and the way that we box ourselves up and really limit our full potential, well, then it does become a huge hindrance. But mindfulness can teach us that there's another way of doing this. And that gives us a sense of agency, and it's really so empowering. So I love this again. Maybe it's true. There's one path in an actual driving
Right.
situation, but oftentimes in our lives we can think outside of the box, and we can really open ourselves up to so much more possibility than we might otherwise know without mindfulness.
But then build on that and change the world. I mean, why spend 2 hours a day stuck in your car, when you can devise a way to get it done, and you have those extra 2 hours to spend with your family, or looking at birds or learning a language or something.
Yeah.
And for someone to expect that this is the world that they built and you're just going to tolerate it forever. I mean, that's reverse mindedness. I don't know. I mean, that's this kind of the way that I think about it. Why should I be doing this? Because they want me to go to the courthouse, okay, for a 2-minute hearing. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
to pick a date for trial. And so, I mean, what I do now is I have an appearance attorney instead of me. And that's what they do. They're happy to do it. They don't cost that much money. So I can stay here and work or whatever. I mean, the way that mindfulness, the way I see it anyway, is you see an alternative that's better, and then you start doing that instead of the regular way. You step outside of the fence or something like that. And that in itself is agency and empowering.
Yeah. It may be the same situation. It may be the same person, the same difficult person, but the more you can understand yourself, the more you have choices, the more you have a choice in how to handle something. So it's not that we need to, when you say alternative, like we can still be in the same situation, we can still be with the same difficult person or the same challenging issue, but we can recognize how maybe we're adding an extra layer of suffering, and the ability to recognize that is what leads to possibility, that gives us choices in how to be with it. So it's helpful for sure.
And then you build your own world, or you build the world that you want. And again, you're not going to spend 2 hours a day stuck in traffic. You'll change your practice. You'll change your job. You'll figure out some way to get another attorney to go there.
Yeah. You can get clarity as to what it is you want, and you can make wise choices. It sounds like you made a very wise choice in getting someone to travel all that way for those short hearings. So it can help us to be more conscious in our lives.
That I minored in philosophy in college. I majored in economics, and we had to take an opposite. So whatever you majored in, you had to take. It wasn't really a minor, but it was I don't know, like 6 classes in an opposite field, I guess.
Yeah, the yin and the yang.
Yeah, it wasn't quite equal. One of them was a little bit smaller than the other.
Yeah,
2/3, 1/3. But yeah, that was. And I'm thinking how much economics is just everything I learned is just kind of thrown out, and now, but the philosophy is still there. So that's it's thinking about that more and more, about making your own world, or at least reacting to the world that you're in. And that is, that's it. Very interesting. Wow. Okay. So I'm rarely at a loss for words. But,
I think with mindfulness, sometimes it's not even having to put it in words as much as it is the experience of the practice. So I'll share with you, and actually I can share with your listeners if they or you are interested in getting experience of the formal practice. You can go onto my website. I actually have on the homepage, there's a free mindfulness e-workbook, and in the workbook there's a guided formal meditation known as the body scan. The body unlike the mind, which can time travel forward and backward,
Right.
the body is always in the here and now. And sometimes just by connecting with the body, feeling into the body, as opposed to spending so much of our times
Right.
analyzing and strategizing and resolving, just that alone can help us to feel a bit more grounded and anchored and connected with the present moment as well as ourselves. So if you visit Courtney Schulnick, you can get your free mindfulness e-workbook. And then if anybody has any questions, they're curious about learning more about mindfulness or working together with me to deepen their mindfulness practice, they can connect with me through LinkedIn or on my website. I have a Connect with Me page where you can get a complimentary 30-minute virtual consultation with me.
Excellent. All right, very good.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, I've got thank you all very much, and thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. And again, it's our goal is to bring you very interesting podcasts every time, and a little bit not outside of the regular practice of law, outside of what you normally experience in a courtroom, and that there is life outside of a legal case. And this is, I think, a very good example of what you can do in the legal case and after the legal case. That it's your life and you'd better take control of it or else. So very good. Well, thank you very much, and please subscribe, and thank you again.
Thank you, Randall. I enjoyed my time together with you.
All right. Thank you. Me too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.